You spend a lot of time on your blog educating people about best practices and what Google really looks for and so on. A lot of the confusion that we see here at SES is over what's really going on with algorithm updates or index refreshing and so on. Can you maybe clarify for everybody what's going on? I know things have changed over the past few years as well, but you can touch on that.
Absolutely. I'll let the audience vote. How many minutes do you want me to talk about that? I can talk for up to 5. Is that okay? Okay. People are like, oh yeah, I really do want to know the difference. Okay, so when I joined Google, it would take up to 3 or 4 months to push out a new index because we didn't have something known as checkpointing. Whenever you crawl the web, it's great to have something called checkpointing because if one machine crashes, you can go back to a known good state. We didn't have checkpointing at that time. Think about your crawler being written in Python, and the one machine goes down, and you're completely hosed. So one thing that changed in mid-2000 was we basically went to a monthly update, and that has been incredibly helpful. That lasted for 3 or 4 years, and people got a lot of value out of that. Now, what's interesting about that is when you're updating your index once a month, you're updating several things. You've got new binaries or executables, and those are the actual ranking programs. You've also got new data because you crawled the web for a month and you've got new stuff to process. And so all that stuff gets combined together. You've got new binaries. Sometimes you have new algorithms. So sometimes you're ranking things in a different way. Starting in summer of 2003, we moved to a process that's called an incremental update as opposed to a batch update, which basically means we're just updating our index a little bit every day. So after a few days, we've updated pretty much our entire main web index. That's very nice because you get fresh content. If somebody launches a new product like the iPhone, you want to be able to search for it 12 hours later and be able to find a lot of people talking about it on the web. So nobody I know wants to go back to those days of a monthly update. But that's basically what happened. We would crawl the web for a month and then push out the data. And we'd take each data center down and load it up with new data. And that would take about a week. So that was what the Google dance was. Sometimes you'd hit the data centers that had the old data, and sometimes you'd hit the data centers that had the new data. And that was fundamentally what the Google dance was. Now, there's something we call basically Everflex. The index is always changing a little bit. So an index update will happen roughly every day. And we'll just crawl new pages and refresh things. You also have things that are known as data pushes. Data push certainly includes the things that get pushed every day, but it can also include things that get pushed every 2 or 3 weeks, or even every 3 or 4 months. So I'll give you one quick example. Last Friday, some people noticed that if you search for Barry Schwartz or Search Engine Land or Search Engine Watch, you'll get these site links, we call them, which are these 4 little indented results. Have you seen these? Yeah, it's often for, you know this is the right result. You want to get some good navigational links surfaced from underneath that. People noticed that changed as of last Friday. So that's an example of a data push. Stuff just basically goes out, and it doesn't happen every single day, so we don't call it an index update. It happens like every 3 or 4 months. But there's a lot of data where you don't have to update that data every single day. And then the final thing is the algorithm updates. And those are the ones that people notice, oh, it's not just changing by a little bit, but the results are changing by quite a lot. Because, suppose we said, if you mention the word Chris Sherman on a web page, that's the signal of quality. Right? I've never seen a single spammer that mentions Chris Sherman. We call it the Chris Sherman signal. Okay? So if we were to write that up as an algorithm, that would take a various amount of time to push, and that would be an algorithm update. And so the website that mentioned Chris Sherman would do a little bit better in the ranking. Now that isn't an actual signal, so we use like that. But that kind of gives you an idea. There's always changes going on. Some of the changes, probably the majority of the changes, happen every day because we're pushing new little bits of our index. And then every few weeks or every few months, we'll push these side data, and that's called data pushes. Sometimes the data pushes, we'll vary them and do different things. And then finally, we have algorithm updates. And that basically is when you see these sort of large-scale shifts in the search results.
You also spend a lot of time on your blog debunking myths or rumors or things about Google that just somehow get put out there on the web and simply aren't true. I mean, I've seen things like the toolbar indexes, hidden URLs, or even that Google's involved with the CIA.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite things that you've debunked about Google?
Absolutely. It is kind of funny. I found an email from September 11th, 2000. I was looking through my email, trying to find interesting things, funny spammers. And someone basically was showing up on a webmaster forum and saying, I just got off the phone with Google, and they say that advertising with Google will help your rankings. Completely false. You know, nobody go home and tell that. Guess what Matt Cutts said at the conference? Completely false. And, you know, as an added little twist of the urban myth, it's like, oh, I just talked to Google on the phone. Yeah, no Googler would ever say that. And if they did, they'd get in very hot water. So those sort of misperceptions, it's really important to get out there and just talk about. You know, the thing I loved about the toolbar was it's an experiment anybody can run. Make a new page that has no links to it. Go visit it with the toolbar. You know, just watch for 3 or 4 months, and you won't see it show up within the index. So it's kind of fun. People can run experiments on, you know, how many words should I use in the title? Well, try different words and see how much, you know, search engines weight them. So one of the great things about SEO is there are lots of experiments you can run. I think the toolbar was fun because it debunked a myth that had kind of been around for a very long time.
You talk about, you know, funny spamming stories. One of the ones you wrote about was this person who claimed that they had undetectable spam, which you found in, what, 30 seconds or something like that?
Yeah.
What other kinds of ridiculous spammer stories do you have that, you know, hopefully nobody's in the room that recognizes their technique here?
I'll try not to embarrass anybody by name. Yeah, I don't know. No, it is kind of funny because this particular person had said, oh, there's no way that search engines can find my doorway. I use super duper cloaking, not just cloaking. And meanwhile, his URLs were like, doorway underscore Google, you know, doorway underscore Alta Vista. I'm like, that's not all that undetectable, you know, like my mom could detect that. So yeah, what is kind of fun is sometimes people will email you, and everybody's gotten these cold calls and sales pitches by email, right? You know, link to my site, I'll link to your site. You may not know that it helps in search engines and stuff like that. Or would you like to sell some links on your site or something like that? And they're always a lot of fun whenever I get those because I follow up. I'll drop them an email and say, well, do you have some example sites you could show me where you've done this before? You know, how does this work? Lead me through the process. And about 2/3 of the people will lead me through the process. So I'm like, you know, show me some example sites where you've either bought or sold links. They're like, oh, well, here's our entire network. We have 31 different Class Ds. I'm like, that's interesting. Thanks. I really appreciate all the help. And, you know, you'll get people who say, well, there's no way you could have seen that cached page because I used the no archive tag, so there shouldn't have been a cached link. And I'll write back and I'll say, well, no archive doesn't have a space in it, and you put a space in it, so you let that cached link out so anybody can see it. You know, anytime you talk about doing something undetectable, you have to realize that it's definitely the case that anybody who's involved in it can sort of escalate that. And we get a lot of reports from email where people say, hey, somebody just dropped me this cold call email. Why don't you guys go check it out?
All those Matt Cutts, you're not visible on the web. We'll get you listed in all the search engines.
They'll even email Google. They say, we checked on search engines for Google.com, and we could increase the visibility of Google.com. It's pretty visible already. But yeah, you can tell people not to send spam email to, you know, the Google corporate email addresses.
Now you're involved with a group of lots of people from both academia and companies called the Adversarial Information Retrieval Group. Can you talk a little bit about that and what your you know, obviously it's a very multidisciplinary sort of group that's coming together to fight spam. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, it's basically an academic conference. So it usually hops onto another conference that's happening, SIG-IR or something, which is like information retrieval and www and stuff like that. AirWeb, or adversarial information retrieval stuff, is essentially, I'm on the program committee and I've been on it for about 3 years. And so every year you'll get, you know, 2, 3, 4 papers to review. And it was interesting. You can see the progression of academic interest in spam. The first year the papers were more along the lines of, well, here's a taxonomy. Here are the different ways you can spam. And they've gradually gotten more and more quantitative. And in fact, this year they have a test set available. So they'll say, okay, here's 767 random URLs, and I believe it's Yahoo that made it available by doing all the ratings of these URLs, which is great. I'm glad they did that. And they said, okay, here are the ones that are web spam, and here are the ones that are clean. So now there's an external test set that researchers can use to try to figure out, yeah, is something hidden, you know, hidden text and spam and stuff like that. And the more that the world knows about spam and works to decrease spam, I think that's a